What if a single choice on a rainy day in 1815 completely rewrote history? The Battle of Waterloo is famous for being Napoleon's final defeat. It was the end of his era and the beginning of a century dominated by Britain. But what if it wasn't? What if a French victory stopped the British Empire in its tracks, erased World War I from ever happening, and even changed the language you're speaking right now? We're about to explore a world that could have been a reality, that was decided on a muddy field in Belgium. This is the incredible and surprisingly plausible chain of events that a French victory at Waterloo could have set in motion. Part 1. The Hinge of Fate. It's June 18th, 1815. The fields near Waterloo are a sea of mud. After a night of pouring rain, two of the greatest generals of the age, Napoleon Bonaparte and the Duke of Wellington, are about to face each other for the first and only time. Napoleon, fresh from his shocking return from exile, had resurrected his empire and was now making a huge gamble. He knew he couldn't beat the combined armies of Britain, Prussia, Austria, and Russia all at once. His strategy was simple: divide and conquer. He had to crush Wellington's Anglo-eyed army and Marshal Blucher's Prussian army before they could team up. 2 days earlier, he'd already beaten the Prussians at the Battle of Ligny. He didn't destroy them, so he sent a third of his army, over 30,000 men under Marshal Grouchy, on a vital mission: hunt down the retreating Prussians and stop them from reaching Wellington, no matter what. In our history, Grouchy messed up. He got fixated on a small Prussian unit, while Blucher's main army marched to save Wellington, turning the tide of the battle and sealing Napoleon's fate. But this is where our story changes. We only need one small, believable tweak. Maybe Grouchy gets clearer orders. Maybe one of his officers convinces him to march toward the sound of the guns at Waterloo. Or maybe he just makes a better guess. The why isn't as important as the what. Marshal Grouchy intercepts and pins down Blucher's army, miles away from Waterloo. Now, Wellington is all alone. Part 2. The immediate aftermath. Back at Waterloo, the battle is a brutal slog. With no Prussians on the horizon, Napoleon doesn't have to worry about his flank. He can focus all his pressure on Wellington's thin red line, and he doesn't have to siphon off his elite reserve, the Old Guard, to plug holes. All afternoon, Wellington's soldiers fight with incredible discipline, beating back waves of French attacks, but they're stretched to the absolute limit. In our timeline, a desperate Wellington said, "Give me night or give me blood." In this timeline, neither comes to save him. As evening falls, Napoleon launches his final, decisive blow. The Imperial Guard, the most feared soldiers in Europe, marches forward. This isn't a desperate, last-ditch effort. It's a concentrated assault aimed at the weakest point in the Allied line. Without the Prussians to back them up, the line bends, and then it breaks. The Anglo-eyed army doesn't just retreat, it shatters. The road to Brussels is wide open. Napoleon has done the impossible. He's won. The political shockwave is catastrophic. In London, the news causes panic. The government's credit collapses. Britain's main army is gone. In Berlin, the news is even worse. Their army, already beaten once, has been mauled again. In Vienna and St. Petersburg, the leaders of Austria and Russia are staring at a terrifying new reality. Napoleon is back. The alliance against him, built on the assumption that he was finished, dissolves almost overnight. Part 3. A new European order. With the British and Prussians reeling, the war isn't over, but the game has completely changed. Napoleon quickly retakes Belgium and pushes for a fast, negotiated peace from a position of total strength. Faced with a victorious and battle-hardened French army, Austria and Russia have little choice but to come to the table. The Seventh Coalition is dead. A new European order, centered on a triumphant France, begins to form. For Prussia, the consequences are devastating. As the primary loser, it gets punished severely in the peace treaty. It would almost certainly lose its territories on the Rhine and be reduced to a second-rate power, killing any dream of uniting the German states. The idea of a unified Germany, the powerhouse that would later define the 19th century, dies right then and there. Britain, while still master of the seas, is humiliated on the continent and diplomatically isolated. It's forced into a kind of 19th century Cold War, trying to contain the Napoleonic system from the outside. Its global empire might still grow, but its power in Europe is a shadow of what it once was. Napoleon himself, now in his late 40s, would likely focus on locking down his empire and securing his dynasty. The Napoleonic Code, with its principles of legal equality and meritocracy, becomes the law of the land across much of Europe. The Bonaparte dynasty is secured, and eventually, his son, Napoleon II, takes the throne. Europe, for all intents and purposes, would be French. Just stop and think about that. A Europe without a unified Germany, run by a French imperial dynasty. It's a completely different world. What do you think would be the biggest change for the average person living back then? Drop your theories in the comments. And if you're enjoying this trip to an alternate past, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Part 4. The Ripple Effect. Through time, as the decades pass, the ripple effects from Waterloo turn into a tidal wave. The biggest consequence of all, World War I, as we know it, almost certainly never happens. The Great War was born from the bitter rivalry between the old powers, Britain and France, and the new, ambitious German Empire. If Germany is never unified, the central player in that conflict just isn't on the board. The web of alliances that dragged the world into war is never spun. The assassination of an archduke in Sarajevo might still happen, but it doesn't ignite a global firestorm, because the powder keg isn't there. Imagine a 20th century without the trenches, without the lost generation, and without the bitter resentments that led directly to the rise of fascism in World War II. The Russian Revolution might not happen either, since the Tsarist regime wouldn't have collapsed under the strain of the First World War. The entire story of the 20th century, a story of total war and ideological battles between communism, fascism, and democracy, is completely erased and rewritten. The colonial world would look different, too. The scramble for Africa would be led by a dominant France, not a messy competition between European powers. French, not English, could have easily become the global language of diplomacy, business, and culture. The United States would still rise, but it would do so in a world where its main cultural connection wasn't Great Britain, but the French Empire. That alone would have massively shaped American politics and culture. Even technology would be different. The incredible leaps in aviation, rocketry, and computing were all supercharged by the two world wars. Without them, progress would have been much slower, driven by commerce instead of military desperation. The cultural capital of the world might have stayed in Paris for another 100 years. From that single Wutzif on a muddy field, a new world emerges. A world where the name Bonaparte means royal dynasty, not final defeat. A world where Germany is still a patchwork of small states and London is just a rival capital, not the financial center of the globe. It's a world without the scars of the world wars, but with its own unique conflicts we can only guess at. The words you're hearing right now might have been in French. The line between our reality and a totally different one can be read. The history we read in books feels so permanent, so inevitable, but so often, it all comes down to a knife's edge single decision, a bungled order, or a field of mud. The Battle of Waterloo wasn't just the end of Napoleon's story, it was the beginning of ours. One tiny change to the script, and we'd be living in a completely different world. What do you think is the wildest consequence of Napoleon winning at Waterloo? And what other historical what-ifs should we explore next? Let us know in the comments. We read them all. And if you want to keep exploring alternate histories, make sous de jure, subscribed with notifications on. Thanks for watching.